In international diplomacy, language is never accidental. It is chosen carefully. It is polished deliberately, and very often, it is used to mask reality. But rarely do we see a disconnect as violent and as cynical as the one currently unfolding between Bangkok and the borderlands of Cambodia. Some analysts have described what we are witnessing not as confusion, but as a masterclass in bureaucratic deception. Because what is happening here is not miscommunication, it is manufactured perception. Through synchronized spokespersons and carefully scripted press releases, the Thai government is constructing an alternate reality. They speak of restraint, they speak of international law, they speak of humanitarian concern. And in the very same breath, they dismiss urgent calls for peace from world leaders, including the President of the United States, as distorted narratives or misunderstandings. They want the world to believe that Thailand is a reluctant actor, forced into conflict by a belligerent neighbor. They want you to believe that F-16 fighter jets are instruments of peace, that naval blockades are measures of safety. But words do not erase consequences, and rhetoric does not bury reality. So tonight, we look past the press conferences, past the podiums, past the suits. We look at what is happening on the ground, because while Bangkok speaks about principles of distinction, artillery is falling on a city of more than 200,000 people. While officials demand sincerity from others, their navy is blocking food routes that civilians depend on to survive. As of December 23rd, this conflict is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Heavy artillery continues to strike villages along Cambodia's northern border, villages with no confirmed military value. Naval shelling persists across the Gulf of Thailand, transforming a commercial trade route into an active combat zone. And tonight, just 2 nights before Christmas, more than 524,000 civilians are displaced. Families are sleeping in open fields. Children are sleeping without shelter, because their homes no longer exist. This is the reality behind the rhetoric, and tonight we must examine the language being used to obscure it. Let's start with the phrase we hear repeatedly, distorted narrative. When the President of the United States announced a ceasefire on December 12th and stated that the conflict was triggered by an accident, the Thai government dismissed that statement as a misunderstanding. When ASEAN called for a halt to hostilities, Thailand responded by saying there was incomplete information. But let's be precise about who is distorting what. You cannot distort a 500-pound bomb crater in a schoolyard. You cannot misinterpret a tank driving through a civilian village. The distortion is not happening on the ground. It is happening in Bangkok, where a politically fragile leadership is attempting to bend reality to preserve its own survival. Thailand claims it is acting in self-defense, but international law is very clear. Under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, self-defense must be necessary and proportionate. Launching airstrikes 90 kilometers inside another country is not defense. Declaring a naval blockade that restricts food and trade is not defense. These are offensive actions, historically recognized as acts of war. If Thailand were truly acting in self-defense, transparency would not be a threat. Independent observers would be welcomed. ASEAN monitoring teams would be invited in. Instead, access is blocked. Why? Because independent observers would see tanks moving forward, not backward. They would see so-called defensive lines functioning as invasion routes. They would see that sovereignty is not being protected, it is being violated. Then there is the recurring justification we keep hearing, landmines. And by now, the pattern is impossible to ignore. Every time international pressure for peace increases, a landmine incident suddenly appears. July, August, November, and again on December 21st, just hours before an ASEAN meeting in Kuala Lumpur. This is not random. This is strategic. Each incident freezes diplomacy. derails negotiations, and manufactures victimhood. Requests for independent verification are rejected. Joint investigations are refused. United Nations experts are denied access because verification would expose what many already suspect. These are old landmines, remnants of earlier conflicts, now weaponized as political tools. The injury of a soldier becomes a justification for renewed escalation. Thailand also claims it is bombing civilian areas to target illegal businesses or scam centers inside Cambodia. But international law does not recognize cross-border bombing as law enforcement. Even if criminal activity exists, Cambodia is a sovereign state. Thailand does not have jurisdiction to drop bombs in Cambodian cities. You do not fire mortars into a city of 200,000 people to serve a warrant. That is not policing. That is collective punishment. And the hypocrisy is impossible to ignore. Thailand's own leadership has been linked to the very criminal networks it claims to be fighting. This is not a war on crime. It is a struggle for control, political and economic. Now let's address the most repeated claim of all, restraint. Thai officials repeatedly cite the principle of distinction, insisting they exercise maximum care to avoid civilian harm. But there is nothing restrained about bombing schools. There is nothing humanitarian about displacing 500,000 people. There is nothing lawful about blocking food supplies to force civilian suffering. If reports involving toxic substances used against villagers are confirmed, that would cross one of the most fundamental red lines in warfare. So the question remains, why is this happening? And the answer is uncomfortable. Because this war is not about national security. It is about regime survival. Thailand is entering a period of political instability. Elections are approaching. Military-aligned parties are losing public support. Institutional protections are expiring. A unifying external conflict offers distraction, legitimacy, control. Cambodian lives are being exchanged for political stability. So when you hear official statements, read them carefully. Ask what they omit. Ask what they justify. Ask who benefits. Because history has taught us something very clearly. When language is used to hide violence, silence becomes complicity.